Thanks very much to Sharewise, and for those attending today. It's great to see you all. So I will run through an overview of Provaris Energy. My name is Martin Carolan. I'm the Managing Director and CEO. I've been with the company since 2019. First as an Executive Director, and then more recently as the MD and CEO. I'm one of the largest sort of top 5 individual shareholders, and I've continued to maintain my position in the company. So the board and management as well as significant shareholders, and we see a bright future for what is critical infrastructure solutions. So a couple of key themes. So we focus in the European market. So they have clearly defined record investment, a continuation of investment and policy settings. So we'll talk about this overarching clean industrial deal. So Europe maintains its goals for decarbonisation setting targets. And we continue to see year on year an investment in clean energy, replacing fossil fuel. The market opportunity for us across Europe contains both hydrogen and, more recently in the last 18 months, CCS or CO2. So the one key point to make is that the majority of demand for Europe's hydrogen requirements needs to be met through imports. Pipelines is planned, but in the interim, to scale and have flexibility, you need shipping solutions. On the CCS side, significant investment now is taking place in storage and shipping solutions, and Norway leads the way. So we talk about this strategic advantage. Our first mover advantage is in our proprietary IP for large-scale tanks, and we've transferred into ship designs and carriers. We own that IP on the hydrogen side, and we're sharing that with our partner Yinson on the CO2 side. So again, the majority of our R&D and commercialization activities are focused in Europe. You can't do anything as a small company without partners. So we've been able to pull together a portfolio of key partnerships in both industry sectors who are leaders. And they really set the pathway for validation. They enable commercialization, and then we'll expand into that commercial advance through the capital of those partners. So as investors, now or future, I think you can rely upon that validation. Now, the capital light model that we've introduced last year, we'll touch on again, but really we're looking to monetize IP development. We're not looking to finance assets. So the key milestones that we're going through in the next 6 months will then convert into commercial events without the large capital overhang of typical small development companies. Our partners will fund, and we will receive fees in format of license. So just quickly on the capital structure, circa 900 million shares, a market cap we think is low at 12 million today. The share register is made up by 9% of board and management. We have Yinson Production, who you hear about today, have a shareholding. We have a group of institutions and predominantly family office investors, and the balance of retail. Our offices are here in Sydney, where it's the home location where I'm based, but I do spend half my year in Oslo, where we have a team and through development and our footprint for commercialization into Europe. So we are an Australian listed company, as mentioned. We do have offices here in Sydney, but the focus is really in Europe with a post in Oslo. We established that office in 2021-22, and our CTO and technical teams are based there. We've been able to advance material, technical, and commercial milestones, which we'll touch on today, supported by partners. And it's this unique IP, which is both designed for tanks and carriers, and how we are fabricating those tanks, these large tanks, offers the industry competitive advantage, and that's key. So we're impacting CapEx and OpEx to drive these costs lower. As mentioned, the capital light model will enable us to bring forward cash flow without the burden of CapEx, and we'll touch on that. So over the last 4 years, we've been developing this compressed H2 carrier that's integrated with supply chain. We've formed partnerships with offtake suppliers and technical partners. And we'll also touch on the relevance and role of Carolan, who will become the owner and operator of such fleets. That is an advanced program of feed design complete, a level of class approvals complete, and we're now in the final stages of prototype and testing. On the CO2 side, we formed a relationship with a company called Yinson Production in the last 18 months. They saw the benefits of what we were doing for large-scale tanks in hydrogen, and we converted that design into their application requirement for liquid CO2. They will then take that tank and put it into their development of supply chains for offshore storage and injection, barge storage, and plans for carriers. That's an important partnership because they are in the industry and a well-known group, and they're providing 100% of the finance for 50% ownership. So two products relevant in two markets. Just quickly on the drivers for industrial scale decarbonisation in Europe. We've seen in Australia, we've seen perhaps a faltering of policy and outline and implementation. The US has diverted in another pathway due to the Trump administration, but it's very clear in Europe they have this policy called the Clean Industrial Deal. It provides $100 billion of funding to support the manufacturing and industrial decarbonisation of industry. So the goal is reduction in emissions by 55% by 2030, 90 by 40, and 0 by 50. So there are three key pillars to that, as well as different efficiencies. One is electrification. So that's the generation of renewable energy, but it comes with bottlenecks around grid connection and higher power prices limiting growth. So while that's suited to certain markets, there are key markets where hydrogen and CCS play critical roles. So when we talk about hydrogen and low carbon fuels, you're trying to remove emissions from chemical process and processes of high heat. It has been considered what was once the Holy Grail. But however, we in today's operating environment, there's a new reality around cost and demand. It's still critical to the pillar, and it still requires scale to have alignment with cost and demand, and that's where our shipping solution plays a key role. On the CCS side, where you can't avoid emissions or eliminate, you're looking to avoid, and you're avoiding through captured carbon and storage. It's been a mature technology for some years, although applied to niche markets. And so it's now seen as this critical third pillar to have industrial scale decarbonisation. And the EU carbon price, which we'll touch on, is really driving the acceleration of that market opportunity. So this is why we sit across those two market opportunities. So 2025, if you look back at our quarterlies and announcements, we've managed to attain some key achievements both in the hydrogen and CO2 programs. We've advanced and maintained the development of these H2 supply chains, which our shipping solution is unlocking. We've been through extensive feed and class approval, and we've established this robotics innovation center in Norway to demonstrate our role of fabrication, and we're building a prototype tank, which is a visible way of engaging and achieving final class approvals. We've achieved a partnership with a Japanese ship owner called Carolan that was established last year. That is key because they will come in as the operator, owner, and financer of these ships, enabling us to receive our license fees. And that is a step change for commercialization. And the joint development with Yinson has accelerated from concept design through to feed. They provide 100% of the financing for 50% ownership of the product that we're developing. They will also be the customer and the first commercialization pathway in their own supply chains. So the joint development of commercial markets is well underway. And of course, they're providing 100% financing, which is conviction and demonstration of that validation step we said before. So the H2 prototype tank we'll touch on, that has a clear milestones around the next 2 quarters for delivery of fabrication and testing. That will then complement the advancement of the H2 supply projects that you'll see for commercialization. K-Line continues to be engaged, and we'll talk about that a bit more. And then the CO2 or the liquid CO2 program is now in its second stage of feed with a completion in mid-2026 and a level of class approval. So that then drops down into partnerships and products for commercialization in CO2 in 26. So, a big year of catalyst for us. When we talk about the focus in Europe and our strategic position in Norway, we've been able to establish key industrial partners for collaborating around the full supply chain. We've got Nordic projects for supply. We've got term sheet level advancement with German utilities such as Uniper for offtake. We've got the shipping partner line to provide the assets and the operational expertise. We've been validating our business model with the likes of Baker Hughes around the role of compression. So our studies indicate that we have a significantly more efficient and lower cost of shipping. It's highly suited to the regional context of Europe. And if you look at the example of why Norway, you've got this 98% renewable grid which supplies the country, that provides access to baseload level of renewable at typically lower prices than anywhere in Europe. That's providing the lowest cost of hydrogen supply. The other side of that transaction is Germany, where you have high renewable power prices producing double the cost of domestic green hydrogen supply, and a need to import 70% of the demand, and already they're building the pipelines. So there is advancement in the market. Norway is our preferred supply location, but we are looking at opportunities for Finland, Spain. We've looked at Iceland and other areas. So we see a maturing portfolio. But the first of those is our project with Norwegian Hydrogen. So to give you an example of what that project entails, so you've got a developer of the hydrogen supply project, which is targeting 40,000 tons of hydrogen. They are the owner developer of that asset, and we've completed a level of pre-feasibility, and it's pending kind of FEED activities. You then have Provaris and Carolan stepping in as the owners and operators of the H2 carriers. Carolan have the operational expertise. They operate ships in the Norway region and in Europe, and those ships are then chartered under long-term contracts. So there's no speculative build of ships without the contracts of that supply and offtake. And in this instance, we have a term sheet with Uniper to offtake 100% of that volume over a 10 to 15-year period under fixed price take or pay obligations. So that is bankable level of offtake partners supporting supply, which generates the shipping. So through this year, we'll continue to see key milestones for both project supply and offtake progress in line with our own shipping program. So that gives you an example of what the first project is. So 2 of our H2 new carriers and 1 barge, which are the assets, which I'll talk about shortly in our design. Last year, we implemented an approach of going capital light and looking to monetize that design and investment in that IP, which we own, through a license fee model. So what we're looking to do is be capital efficient and generate income through the licensing of that design. So typically, when a ship owner will commission ships under a new build process, that is taken at FID. So the ambition here is to have a 5% fee of capital cost of the assets, put it through construction, and then in operation have a percentage of carried equity ownership in each of those assets. So the example here we're using is 5% of capital cost, which produces cash flow income to Provaris through construction, and then a percentage of carried equity ownership in those time charter fees, which provides you an annuity fee income stream. So we provided a summary example here of license fees in the order of $16 million per project USD, and our equity share of that time charter fee over 15 years is another $18 million. So $30-odd million US or $50-odd million Australian is a considerable return on our investment to date, and we're at that final stages of being at this inflection point. So when analysts are able to model that out, it's at a significant NPV to our current market cap today. So that should give an example of the clarity of cash flows we generate under license fee models, and we remove the burden of CapEx over the company. The ship itself, which we've provided quite a bit of detail in the past, but essentially it is advanced feed level design approved by class. So the design package is approved. The next stage of development is to go through what's called a prototype tank development and testing phase. We have a US patent granted. So the ship is essentially finished from a design and approval perspective. It's based on a standard hull MR tanker. What you see there in the inset is the unique tank design and integration with hull that we've developed, and then we've developed the whole wrap around the ship. Carolan has come in as global shipping operator. They've done extensive technical due diligence over the design and the class approval package. And so, as we've said, this next step that we've been developing is a prototype of that tank, where we are constructing that tank at a facility in Norway that we've leased on the west coast. You can see there we produce a digital twin, which gives you a virtual fabrication outline of construction of that tank. And then we go ahead and we've acquired the robotics, the laser welding equipment, and we're now constructing that tank. So we will continue to fabricate that through this Q1 2026 and look to commence testing and approvals in the second quarter. That approval to construct is a key milestone from Class, and it really validates both the technical design, its safety, its compliance with rules and regulations, and it confirms the feasibility of the construct of our design. So we not only own the design, but we're developing the method of production, which is changing the cost of the way these tanks are produced. Here's a visual representation of the actual prototype tank itself. Last year, we had Carolan and a number of other stakeholders from Yinson and other groups on site. Here you'll see a representation on the left. You've got one of the cylinder sections under a jig being fabricated with two robots. One robot picks up plate, mounts it to the jig, and the other robot will come through and do tack welding and then seam welding. So it's two cylinders and two end caps, and we're trying to demonstrate how this scalable fabrication works through automation, and the level of accuracy that this design is applied. So this is a first for these types of tanks, which has also then been able to enable us to move into new markets such as CO2. So the role of Carolan is important. So Carolan itself is one of the top 20 ship owners and operators globally. It's one of four major Japanese carriers. They operate some 450 vessels, including 90 across the energy sector. They have established ship operations in energy in Europe and in the Norway region. Those operations run out of the UK. They've been running gas carriers in Norway to Europe for some time, and they are the sole operator today of the first set of LCO2 carriers in Norway's Northern Lights project. So clearly a tier one partner with a reputation for operations and ability to tap into Japan's low-cost debt financing and innovation funding for these new style of assets. They see these compressed hydrogen vessels fitting into their strategy of their long-term approach to new energy carriers. So the role of what we're doing, we established this MOU back in July 2005. We've been developing time charter financing, operational cost models. We've done significant technical due diligence where we've achieved a number of internal milestones. That's included a site trip. So we're now in the process of talking to Asian yards about fabrication of tanks and ships, and ultimately we'll develop a special purpose company to own and operate these vessels. So it's been an important stepping point for us in terms of validation of the model, but also the technical design. And now we're demonstrating constructability where they will stand in as the owner operator of these vessels and where we paid a license fee. So that's been a critical inflection point for us. So I'll now move to the CO2 side. We're sort of 20 minutes in, and I'll touch on the accelerated development that we've had. I don't think the CO2 sort of sector capacity is, as a sector, is well known and understood here in Australia. There are ambitions for Australia to also be in the space of capturing capacity, but in Europe has been identified as one of the key regional markets to kick off at scale. People like D&D and others have been forecasting large growth in the markets in maturing, so a quadrupling of the capacity or storage capacity requirements in Europe across multiple industries, which is generating demand for new CO2 carriers, injection assets, and storage assets. So the demand growth between now and 2030 is quite evident, and they are now scaling up what is an existing mature technology. It's not new technology being first to market. So again, why the relevance of Norway? It has ideal geology for capture and storage offshore. Its proximity to the major emitters in Europe is quite clear, and it's emerged as the leader today in defining what is the first truly scalable storage and capture facility. So there's a project called the Northern Lights up in northern Norway, which then injects into an asset in the North Sea. It's owned by Total, Equinor, and Shell. It's been operating at 1.5 million tonnes per annum capacity, and just in the last couple of months, they've expanded to 5 million tonne capacity. So we're seeing increasing confidence in shipping and storage and injection. And I think the other inflection point is the increasing forecast for this carbon price, which is moving above, in the next couple of years, above this $100 per tonne threshold, which is seen to be economic for projects to move forward and advancing towards $200 a tonne. So for this to scale, we need new large-scale solutions for transport and storage, and that's where we've come into our relationship with Yinson. Yinson Production themselves are part of a large Malaysian company. They have their operations out of Oslo. They're an operator of 9 floating storage and production units for oil and gas. Has some $2.5 billion revenue company. So a very large, sophisticated company that operate large offshore assets. They approached us, over a year ago to look at developing new large tanks, which is solving an industry problem where existing tank capacities are constrained by capacity due to material thickness and the use of conventional welding. So when they look at our approach of layering steel using robotics and laser welding, they've challenged us to come up with a design to significantly increase the capacity of some 4 to 5 times of what the market has. So that's progressed to full funding. So they fund 100%. We own 50/50 of the outcome of the IP and design. And we've now progressed to a FEED study, which is due to complete in the middle of this year. So Yinson are not only just speculating on the market, they're actually developers of the full supply chain. There is a project which they're bought into called the Harrowstone CCS project. It's a 10 million ton offshore storage and injection project. And for that, they are developing what's called a floating storage injection unit. And that is the key market opportunity, which is looking to take an investment decision later this year. So new designs, capacities, lower the capital cost of vessels. And I'll give you an example of that on the next slide. So we've been able to make significant progress through the support of Yinson's technical understanding, but we've leveraged all the work we've done in multiple years in hydrogen into CO2. This is a completely new design of tank, but it extends on the way which we fabricate. The concept design completed in March, phase 1 completed of FEED in January 22 and June 26, together with a level of class approval will be the next key milestones. So that sets us up to align with Yinson's overall investment timeline of taking FID on this FSIU late 2026. And to give you an example of the benefit and impact we're having on this design, the original concept design had 16 tanks of existing tanks, and we've consolidated that down to 4 large tanks. So the impact is to reduce the overall size of the unit by some 30%, which has a significant capital saving. And then by reducing 16 tanks down to 4, we're going to eliminate a number of operating equipment, which has the long-term benefits of OpEx. So this is an exciting opportunity, which we can see also expanding into shipping. So graphically, where do these tanks sit? So it sits in the storage and injection unit. It's available for carriers, and it's available for storage and injection hubs as well. So together with Yinson at the end of 26, we'll be in the market marketing these tanks, of which again will have a license fee regime. So an overview of milestones. So 2025 has continued to have both commercial and technical success. Obviously, going into the June quarter, we have key milestones around prototype and class approvals for H2. We will continue to show progress with Carolan, and we're talking to fabricators about firming up cost of construction on H2. And then there'll be some hydrogen project announcements. On the CO2 side, we're in this last and second phase of FEED development, which is accelerated quite quickly. That will culminate in a level of class approval with T&D. And then we are talking about moving to the joint venture for commercialization. You've seen evidence around selection of potential fabrication yards. So Yinson are not just in the design phase, they are in planning for construction and operations. And so we've been working with them on who's going to fabricate and deliver the tanks into their units. So yeah, a busy period of both technical and commercial milestones over the next 6 months. So just to wrap up in 25 minutes. So again, just to reiterate the highlights. So there's clearly an advanced development of 2 critical solutions in 2 markets, ideally positioned for Europe. One is hydrogen, which has gone through some challenges in terms of its growing pains, but we still see the reality of getting things done. And CO2 is becoming more prevalent as a way of limiting and removing emissions. Location-wise, in Norway, strategic to us, whether it's grid connection, H2 supply, shipping markets, energy services, but it leads the way in CCS, and it gives us access down the path to EU funding for capital and operating develops. In terms of partnerships, we've demonstrated the validation of our technical and future commercial model through partners both in hydrogen and CO2, and Yenson providing 100% funding should be clear to current and future investors that they have clear commitment and intent to move to a commercialization phase for CO2. Plenty of catalysts as we've just been through, and I think the last point, just to reiterate, this technology licensing model is about taking things through to final stage of approvals and then licensing that design to owners of assets. So that does two things. It brings forward cash flow from a construction decision and then long-term revenue over the asset, but it removes this large capital burden, which most small development companies here in Australia would have. When you hit an investment milestone, we won't have that capital burden that will be borne by the partners. So that adds to significant upside to our share price today. So with that, I'll hand back to you for any questions.
Martin, that was absolutely excellent. Thank you very much for taking us through PV1 and the current strategy that you are implementing. I had a few questions. First of all, I know that you did discuss the relationship between PV1 and Norway. However, would you be able to explore why the focus is on Norway as opposed to Australia at the moment?
Yeah, thanks. I think one is access to services, infrastructure, and the regional proximity to where is the market. So if you're going to develop a product, you need to be close to market. Germany and Europe is the market for hydrogen right now, and so you need to be in that proximity. The model that we imply for H2 shipping through compression is the most efficient and low cost in that regional context setting. And in Australia, you have this tyranny of distance, and also that you need to build out all of that renewable infrastructure in order just to produce a molecule of hydrogen. So Australia, longer distance, longer time frame, higher cost, versus Norway, where proximity, strategic supply, and the lowest and most advanced market to be in.
Okay, terrific. That makes a lot of sense. Well, then, another one, Martin. I know that you did discuss Carolan's partnership and what that means for you. Are you able to clarify the role for the Carolan partnership and H2 shipping for this year?
Yeah, so we've been through development of what we see as the commercial returns for such an owner, and that's been well received. Carolan is looking at how they would finance the capital for ships, the development of a special purpose company, how the structure would be. There's access to low cost debt financing in the shipping markets in Japan is quite common, and there'd be some co-investors from an equity perspective. I think most importantly, they then bring the credibility to deal with yards around fabrication and cost. And then from an owner's perspective, they bring 100 years of expertise on how to operate these vessels. So all of those factors is de-risking our chance of success.
Absolutely terrific. We love to de-risk. Now, I have a question from Michael. And Martin, Michael asks and mentions that you recently announced a MOU with Mile out of China for LCO2 to assess fabrication of tanks. What Western partners have Mile worked with within the industry?
Yeah, so Mile has been operating for some 30 years as a group of companies. They have a very large fabrication facility in Rushan in the Shandong area. They produce large modules for offshore supply units for the likes of all the major Western energy companies through to the major EPC companies that we've seen operating. So Yenson have also procured units for their FPSO and FSO units. So a well-regarded company which has the credibility and the expertise on dealing with quality assurance and delivery timelines that Western countries require.
Terrific. And just touching on the back of your partnership with Yinson, can you clarify the future JV partnership with Yinson and the role with Mile, given the recent MOU?
Yeah, so the joint venture is only Provaris and Yenson. So today they provide full funding under the joint development agreement, and we deliver the tank program. That will then convert to a joint venture company, which we've started to draft the agreement around what that looks like. That company will be purely used for marketing of the tank, licensing that into products, and Yinson will be ideally the first company from that joint venture, first customer from that joint venture. The relationship with Highmile is about moving forward on how do we define fabrication, the cost of the facility to fabricate these tanks, which are new, and then Yinson are looking for clarity around production costs. So we're trying to define that there is a commercial pathway to these tanks, not just a conceptual business plan.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, last one from me, and of course, any other investors that have questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section. Martin, to wrap this up, in your perspective, in your opinion, what are the material catalysts for 2026?
Yes, thanks. So we touched on, from a hydrogen perspective, this quarter we're looking to wrap up fabrication of the hydrogen tank and then test and receive that final approval to construct from class. So that's the culmination of a number of years development, which then is supported by Carolan in their plans to move forward with commercialization of those vessels and projects. So that's the key timeline there. From I guess if investors are looking at the next 2 quarters and through 26. On the CO2 side, we're completing FEED in June. That will come with a requisite level of class approval. That's the FEED and class approval we've already received for H2. At the moment, we are planning to then test some components at our facility in Norway, and then that would then transition to the joint venture and selection of those tanks in Yinson products and then market to other companies. So really up to June, you see critical technical milestones, and then the second half of the year, you'll start to realize value through evidence of commercial deals, which has a see-through value of what that future license income will have.
Understood. We'll make sure to keep our eyes on PV1 in June. I do have a question from Ian. Now, to summarize, Ian is asking, what do you think has changed in the market to make you optimistic about the next 5 years, Martin, compared to the previous 5 years?
Well, the previous 5 years, we were only servicing one market, so that was hydrogen only. So, through the heavy investment and advancement that we've made and clear benefits to the way you can design and construct these tanks, we've been able to generate a second market. I think in the next 5 years, there's a sensible reality that emissions need to be captured or removed. It will be done through various pillars, but hydrogen still remains one of those, albeit with a different time frame for scale. But that scale matches our model. CO2 is advancing much quicker than what we had ever envisioned. And so we see probably both programs running in parallel in their ability to complete the technical milestones and then get into licensing deals and then into operations. So most of these large-scale assets require 3 years of construction. So the investment decisions for these to be ready need to be in the next 12 months.
Great to hear. That second market that you've been discussing sounds extremely exciting. Martin, thank you very much for your time. If there's no more questions, of course, you can revisit this webinar on the Sharewise YouTube channel. Martin, thank you again for your time and for everyone that has joined. Until next time, really looking forward to keeping our eyes on PV1 and see how it performs this year. Thank you, everyone. You guys take care.
Thank you.